there's something about the kinds of analytics that Motif specializes in, and it's actually related to the name of Motif, which is
Yep.
that the firm specializes in sequence analytics. So, how is that different from analytics in general?
Yeah, I think the major insight that we're trying to work around here is that when people are using apps and services, they generate sequences of events that capture in a really rich way what they're doing while they're using sites and services, whether they're succeeding at what they're trying to do, where they might be encountering some friction or bad user experiences. And that, like, a lot of tools and techniques aren't really able to work with sequence data in a native way, and frequently they're kind of compressed into metrics. So we're very good at like counting things and taking averages, and making kind of like a time series plot of like how many people are doing certain things. But then in this disaggregated form, actually, there's much richer information available, and most of it just gets discarded. So in a lot of ways, probably one of the biggest potential unlocks for a lot of these teams is being able to use more of the data that they're already collecting. And this kind of like log event data is very common in practice, but frequently when people work with it, they kind of have to flatten it into cross-sectional form first. And so I think we're really working on kind of defining what this space looks like, but it has a lot of potential because it's kind of a middle ground between time series data and cross-sectional data. And time series data is sort of like aggregated around the time dimension, and we're capturing like aggregate over many people. And then cross-sectional data is like aggregated over time into the user dimension. And so we get this like slice in time. And so is there a middle ground between those two things that can kind of get us the best of both worlds? And I think the answer is yes.
Cool. So, one of the obvious kinds of sequence data to me is anything that unfolds over time. It seems like that's a lot of what you're going to be dealing with. And that's really important in a lot of business applications. Obviously, we have, sales change over time, revenue changes over time. You can think pretty much anything you can measure, you can count over time, since time is always passing around us. But are there other kinds of sequences that we could also potentially analyze with your tools, or is time kind of the main idea?
Well, you would think about a user, a time, and a tag would be the simplest kind of data that we work with. So, when a user starts using Google, they start typing, they might click search, then they choose to click on some results. So there's a little story encoded by that set of actions, and uh, and and that's a powerful data format. It's also very universal, and I think it applies to almost anything that any website or app that has logging enabled is something that I think we should be able to help them at some point work with their data.
Nice. So for now, the tools might not apply to things like natural language sequences or like an audio sequence or genetic sequence. It's
Right.
specific to kinds of like temporal events, right?
Right. Yeah. I mean, we've been calling it event sequences, but yeah, it is funny when I first tell people I work on sequence analytics. They ask me about genomics a lot. It's kind of one of the first things that comes to mind.
That's what
So,
popped into my mind first too. But I did a genomics PhD, so I was like, is that just me?
yeah, well, we're trying to borrow some ideas from those fields, and I think there are some relationships. Probably the biggest distinction is that like regular sequences like text or genomics have like sort of a fixed frequency of sampling, whereas like
Right.
events generated by a user interacting with the platform are kind of like have a timestamp associated with them and can be dispersed over time.
hmm Yeah, and so I'm not sure how much this factors in with your product, but something with event analysis that can often be really tricky is the events that we're most interested in often occur quite rarely. So, if we think about kind of a binary label in a lot of different domains, we have the positive label might occur very rarely, like 100 in 100 events or 1 in 1,000 events relative to the negative label. Does that end up factoring in with any of your kind of analytics?
I mean, certainly we're very interested in kind of, drilling down into very specific situations that users might be in when they're using a product or service. And yeah, those situations are often quite rare, and they're defined by sort of certain patterns of behavior, like, clicking into a deeply nested menu or deeply nested funnel. And so, yeah, I think there is a kind of rareness problem that we encounter, and that's why we work with this very disaggregated form of the data. It's sort of we're assuming that the interestingness is happening kind of in the corners of your app, and we'd like to kind of help you find that.